Hello, my name is Ben Lovegrove, and in this video I'm going to read part 2 of the CAA Safety Sense Leaflet number 1, Good Airmanship. The leaflet has been reproduced here in video format with the kind permission of the CAA. To download a copy of this or any other in the series to print off or store on your device, please visit caa.co.uk/safety sense. Introduction. Although this guide is mainly intended for private pilots of fixed-wing aircraft, much of the advice will be relevant to all pilots, whatever their experience or the type of aircraft they fly. However, there are specific leaflets giving more detailed advice for helicopter number 17 and balloon number 16 pilots. Any review of general aviation accidents shows that most should not have happened. They result from a combination of the following: use of incorrect techniques, lack of preparation before flight, being out of practice, lack of appreciation of weather, overconfidence, flying illegally or outside license privileges, failing to maintain control, a complacent attitude, and the "it will be all right" syndrome. Comprehensive knowledge, careful preparation, and frequent flying practice are key elements in developing good airmanship, which is the best insurance against appearing as an accident statistic. Practice. Pre-flight inspection. Remove tie-downs, control locks, pitot cover and tow bar. Then complete a thorough pre-flight inspection. Use the checklist unless you are very familiar with the aircraft. Remember, magnetos are live unless properly earthed. Any damaged wiring may result in the engine suddenly bursting into life unexpectedly, especially if the propeller is moved. Take precautions such as closing the throttle, tightening the friction, and chocking the wheels before touching a propeller if you have to, and keep fingers away from the edges. Determine visually that you have enough fuel of the right type. If necessary, use a dipstick to check fuel levels. Personally, supervise refueling. Don't let anyone confuse avgas and Jet A1. Make sure the filler caps are properly secured. With the fuel selector on, check fuel drains for water and other contamination. Be aware of the danger of static electricity during refueling. Check engine oil level and, if necessary, top up with the correct grade. Do not overfill. If you find anything with which you are unhappy, seek further advice. Remove all ice, frost and snow from the aircraft. Even frost spoils the airflow over aerofoil surfaces, resulting in loss of lift and abnormal control effects. Beware of refreezing. Use only authorized de-icing fluids. See Safety Sense Leaflet number 3, Winter Flying, which is also available as a video in my channel. Check visually that the flying control surfaces move in the correct sense in response to control inputs. Properly secure any baggage so that nothing can foul the flying controls. Beware of loose items, for example passengers' cameras. The law requires you must brief passengers on location and use of doors, emergency exits and equipment, as well as procedures to be followed in the event of an emergency. Personally, secure doors and luggage hatches. See Safety Sense Leaflet number 2, Care of Passengers. Confirm all seats are upright for takeoff and properly locked in place. Starting engine. Know where to find and how to use the aircraft's fire extinguisher, as well as the location of any others in the vicinity. Never attempt to hand swing a propeller or allow anyone else to swing your propeller unless you know the proper, safe procedure for your aircraft and situation, and there is a suitably briefed person at the controls, the brakes are on, and/or the wheels are chocked. Check that the area behind the aircraft is clear. Use a checklist which details the correct sequence for starting the engine. Make sure the brakes are on or chocks in place and that avionics are off before starting engine. Takeoff. Never attempt to take off unless you are sure the surface and length available are suitable. Visually check the approach to both ends and runway are clear before lining up and taking off. Choose an acceleration checkpoint from which you can stop if the aircraft hasn't achieved a safe speed. If you haven't reached, for example, 2/3 of your rotate speed by 1/3 of the way along the runway, abandon the takeoff. In the event of engine failure after takeoff, achieve and maintain the appropriate approach speed for your height. If the runway remaining is long enough, re-land, and if not, make a glide landing on the least unsuitable area ahead of you. It is a question of knowing your aircraft, your level of experience and practice, and working out beforehand your best options for various heights at the aerodrome in use. Attempting to turn back without sufficient available energy has killed many pilots and passengers. One day, at a safe height and well away from the circuit, try a 180-degree turn at idle RPM and see much height you lose. Then remember you will probably have more drag and have to turn more than 180 degrees in a real situation. Look out. Always keep a good lookout and listen out for other aircraft, particularly over radio beacons and in the vicinity of aerodromes, visual reference points and navigation choke points between hills and airspace restrictions. Gliders climb in the thermals underneath cumulus clouds and cruise often at quite high speed between them. The most hazardous conflicts are those aircraft with the least relative movement to your own. These are the ones that are difficult to see and the ones you are most likely to hit. Beware of blind spots and move your head or the aircraft to uncover these areas. Scan effectively and remember faster aircraft may come up behind you. See Safety Sense Leaflet number 13, Collision Avoidance. Remember the rules of the air, which include flying on the right side of line features and giving way to traffic on your right. If the aircraft has strobe lights, use them in the air. Especially in a crowded circuit, use landing lights as well. Spend as little time as possible with your head in the office. If you have a transponder, select and transmit the conspicuity code 7000 with Mode C altitude reporting, unless another is appropriate or ATC instruct. Airspace. Do not enter controlled airspace unless properly authorized. See Safety Sense Leaflet number 27, Flight in Controlled Airspace. You might have to orbit and wait for permission. Keep out of restricted and danger airspace. Don't forget danger area crossing and information services. Use the lower airspace radar service, available from many aerodromes, particularly on weekdays. It may prevent you from getting a nasty fright from military or other aircraft. See Safety Sense Leaflet number 8, Air Traffic Services Outside Controlled Airspace. Deconfliction Service can tell you about conflicting aircraft and offer advice to avoid. Traffic Service can give you details of conflicting aircraft, but you have to decide if avoiding action is necessary. Make sure you know which service you are receiving. Pilots are always responsible for their own terrain and obstacle clearance. Allocation of a transponder code does not mean that you are receiving a service. En route. Log all important information, including heading changes with the time you make them. Keep looking well ahead and around for indications of possible weather problems, such as cloud between you and the horizon making it appear lower. If you encounter deteriorating weather, turn back or divert early, well before you are caught in cloud. A 180-degree turn in cloud will not be as easy as in the skill test. Do not attempt to fly between lowering cloud and rising ground. Many pilots have come to grief because a lowering cloud base has forced them lower and lower into hills. You must avoid scud running. If forced into or above cloud, do not fly below your planned safety altitude. Don't overlook en route checks such as FRIDA, fuel, radio, engine, DI and altimeter. Engine should include a carb heat check. Diversion. Unless you have a valid IR or instrument rating and are flying a suitably equipped aircraft, you must remain in sight of the surface. Before takeoff, make plans for a retreat or diversion to an alternative aerodrome in the event of encountering lowering cloud base or deteriorating visibility. If cloud base lowers to your calculated minimum flying altitude or in-flight visibility drops to 3 kilometers, carry out these plans immediately. Turn back before entering cloud. Don't fly above clouds unless they are widely scattered and you can remain in sight of the surface. Divert to the nearest aerodrome if the periodic fuel check indicates you won't have your planned fuel reserve at destination. An occasional weather check from Volmet is always worthwhile. Lost. If you become unsure of your position, then tell someone. Transmit first on your working frequency. If you have lost contact on that frequency or they cannot help you, then change to 121.5 and use training fix, PAN or Mayday, whichever is appropriate. See radio telephony. If you have a transponder, you may wish to select the emergency code, which is 7700. It will instantly alert a radar controller. Few pilots like to admit a problem on the radio. However, if any of the Help Me items below apply to you, you should call for assistance quickly. H. High ground or obstructions. Are you near any? E. Entering controlled airspace. Are you close? L. Limited experience, low time or student pilot. Let them know. P. Position uncertain. Get a training fix in good time. Don't leave it too late. M. Met conditions. Is the weather deteriorating? And E. Endurance. Fuel remaining. Is it getting short? As a last resort, make an early decision to land in a field while you have the fuel and daylight to do so. Choose a field with care by making a careful reconnaissance. Do not take off again without the landowner's permission, inspecting the aircraft and takeoff run carefully, and obtaining a weather update or further advice. Speed control. Good airspeed control can prevent inadvertent stalling or spinning, a major killer in aviation. It can also reduce the risk of expensive aircraft damage on landing. When landing, aim for the flight handbook speed or 1.3 times the stall speed with flap if none is published over the threshold, and reduce speed in the roundout. If the headwind is turbulent or gusty, add a margin of say 5 knots or half the gust factor, whichever is the greater. If the speed is high, the landing distance required is likely to be more than you calculated. Practice flying your approaches at accurate, calculated airspeeds. A spin occurs when an aircraft is out of balance at the stall, so always practice keeping the ball in the center and do not attempt to raise a dropped wing until all stall symptoms have been removed. Refer to Handling Sense Leaflet number 2, Stall Spin Awareness. Pilots have lost control of their aircraft when trying to climb at too low a speed after takeoff, especially at high weight in high temperatures. Use the correct climb speeds. If you have not practiced slow flight for some time, get an instructor to accompany you while you do so, at a safe altitude. Do not exceed the limiting speeds for your aircraft. That includes maximum maneuvering speed, VA. Do not apply extreme control movements at any time. In aeroplanes with fixed pitch propellers, beware of maximum RPM. Environmental. Few people like aircraft noise, and several aerodromes are under threat of closure due to this, so it is vital to be a good neighbor. Adhere to noise abatement procedures and do not fly over published or briefed noise-sensitive areas near aerodromes. Select sites for practice forced landings or aerobatics very carefully. Hassle includes location. When en route, fly at a height and power setting to minimize noise nuisance, in addition to complying with Rule 5, low flying. When flying a variable pitch propeller aircraft, change pitch slowly to avoid excessive noise. When flying twins, synchronize the engines to avoid beats. Select engine run-up areas to minimize disturbance to people, animals, etc. Never be tempted to fly low or beat up the countryside. Wind and wake turbulence. Know the maximum demonstrated crosswind for the aircraft type you are flying and factor this for your experience and recency. Remember, that was obtained by a test pilot. If the wind approaches what you have decided is your own limit, be ready to divert. Use the sixth sense rule to work out the crosswind component. 10 degrees off runway equals 1/6 of the wind. 20 degrees off runway equals 2/6 of the wind. 30 degrees off runway equals 3/6 of the wind, etc. If there is a crosswind, the reduced headwind component will lengthen the takeoff and landing runs. You may retain better control on landing by not using full flap, further increasing the landing distance. If another runway, which is more into wind, is available, use it, after asking air traffic control if there is one. You may have to wait a few minutes to fit in with other traffic. When winds or gusts exceed 66% of the aircraft's stall speed, 50% for tail draggers, in general, don't go flying. If you have to, use outside assistance for taxiing, such as a wing walker. Taxi very slowly when winds exceed 30% of the stall speed, unless the pilot operating handbook specifies otherwise. And be very careful when the wind is from your rear. On the ground, stay 1,000 feet clear of the blast end of powerful aircraft. Beware of wake turbulence behind heavier aircraft, especially helicopters, on takeoff, during the approach or on landing. You should remain 8 nautical miles or 4 minutes or more behind most large aircraft. Note that wake turbulence lingers when wind conditions are very light. These very powerful vortices are invisible. Heed air traffic warnings. See Safety Sense Leaflet number 15, Wake Vortex. Circuit procedures. When joining or rejoining, make your radio call early and keep radio transmissions to the point. Know the non-radio procedures in case of failure. See CAP 413 and Safety Sense Leaflet number 6, Aerodrome Sense. Check that the change from QNH to QFE reduces the altimeter reading by the aerodrome elevation. If landing using QNH, e.g. at a strip, don't forget to add aerodrome elevation to your planned circuit height. Use the correct joining procedures for your destination aerodrome. Unless otherwise published, make a standard join from the overhead. See CAP 413 and poster Standard Overhead Join. Check circuit height and direction. Be aware of and look out for other aviation activity such as gliding and parachuting. Check the windsock or signal square or nearby smoke to ensure you land in the right direction. Be very sure of the wind direction and strength before committing yourself to an approach at a non-radio aerodrome. Make radio calls in the circuit at the proper places. Listen and look out for other circuit traffic. Don't forget pre-landing checks, easily forgotten if you make a straight-in approach. Be aware of optical illusions at unfamiliar aerodromes with sloping runway or terrain, or with very long or very wide runways. Take care where runways can be confused, e.g. 02 and 20. Make sure you know whether the circuit is left or right hand, as this will determine the dead side. If in doubt, ask. In most piston engine aircraft, apply full carb heat early enough to warm it up before reducing power. Landing. A good landing is a result of a good approach. If your approach is bad, make an early decision and go around. Don't try to scrape in. Plan to touch down at the right speed, close to the runway threshold, unless the field length allows otherwise. Use any approach guidance like PAPI or VASI to cross-check your descent. Go around if not solidly on in the first third of the runway, or the first quarter if the runway is wet grass. However, if the runway is very long, plan your landing to minimize runway occupancy. Think of the next user. Wait until you are clear of the active runway, then stop to carry out the after-landing checks. Double check the lever you intend moving is the flaps and not the landing gear. If the clearance between the propeller and the ground is small, or grass is long and hiding obstructions, be especially watchful to prevent taxiing accidents. If you are changing passengers, shut down the engine. Do not do running changes. Propellers are very dangerous. Remember, the flight isn't over until the engines are shut down and all checks completed. Book in and close any flight plan or contact your responsible person. Summary: keep in current flying practice, have an annual checkout with particular emphasis on stall recognition and asymmetric practice in twins. Get an aviation weather forecast. Prepare a thorough route plan using the latest charts, check on NOTAMs, temporary nav warnings, etc. If GPS backs up your visual navigation, load and check the route beforehand. Know the aircraft thoroughly. Don't overload the aircraft. Make sure the runway is long enough in the conditions. Over water in a single-engined aircraft, wear a life jacket, perhaps also an immersion suit, and carry an accessible life raft. Pre-flight properly with special emphasis on fuel and oil contents and flying controls. In a single-engined aircraft, bear in mind the consequences of engine failure. Maintain a good lookout, scan effectively, and be aware of threat areas. If the weather deteriorates or night approaches, make the decision to divert or return early. Don't end up in weather outside your ability or license privileges. Never descend below your safety altitude in IMC. Request help early if lost or you have other problems, e.g. fuel shortage. Keep out of controlled airspace unless you have clearance. Make regular cruise checks including fuel contents and selection and carb heat. Maintain flying speed. Avoid inadvertent stall or spin. Don't fly low and slow. Always treat propellers as live. Don't do anything stupid. Become an old pilot, not a bold pilot. And finally, pilots exercising good airmanship never sit there doing nothing. They always think 15 to 20 miles ahead. That's the end of part 2 of the CAA Safety Sense Leaflet number 1, Good Airmanship. Part 1 is available on my channel in the CAA Safety Sense playlist. If you have any additional tips or experiences you would like to pass on, then please post a comment below. Subscribe to my channel and click the bell to be notified of the next video in this series. And please share this video within the general aviation community so that pilots and student pilots can benefit from the advice.